sure if you've heard of this guy. He is famously known to have built and sold his company for 100 crores. And while you've probably heard his story a gazillion times, today he is going to take a hot sauce challenge.
My tongue is already burning. That's intense. I can't even talk.
And tell us about the secrets of his success, how to start a business in today's day and age, and a lot more. And you're watching The Sweet Spot.
So Arjun, welcome to the show. So before we get started, few rules for the show, right? So you get started with the least mildest of the spiciest sauces we have and go till the end towards the extremely spicy one. Throughout the show, you have a lifeline, and only way you can unlock your lifeline is by saying the magic words, hit me with the sweet spot. So the second you say it, you'll be served your favorite dessert.
Okay.
So yeah, are you ready for the whole show?
I'm scared, but I'm ready. Let's go.
Just to get started, Arjun, we know you come from a, let's say, privileged background, and you've done your schooling at Ambani, you've gone to Brown, and usually when people come from a comfortable background, what happens is they lose their drive. They don't tend to want to be great at things, but that's very different from you, from what I've noticed. So where does that drive come from?
I wouldn't say they don't want to be great at things. I think it's just a safety net allows you to just say, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I won't go for it. Actually, I'm a son of an entrepreneur, right? My dad's an entrepreneur as well. Yeah. So that sort of ethic of hard work, of doing those like long days, of sacrificing a lot of things is something I saw from the time that I've grown up. Like there was a time my dad missed my birthday and he had to miss my birthday, and that was fine. So I think that came from early on, from seeing what's around you, and as a kid you sort of just like take in what's around you, right? So I think that was really what taught me about this. And then, to be honest, I think that I've always been and will continue to always be ambitious, driven, excited, and I have this thing in me which I think a lot of entrepreneurs have, of constantly wanting more, of constantly trying to do more, of constantly getting more and more, right? So I think that's what keeps me going. But I do kind of agree sometimes with your point. I think that for me specifically, there was no other option. I don't see it in any other way.
What you're trying to say is like, you are this, and there was never a...
Yeah.
There was never
regardless of the background, regardless of what's around me, I will still keep fighting.
Tell us something. You came back from Brown. You were always going to come back. What made you want to go back to your grandfather's legacy business, and what made you want to start with this? And take us through a journey of how you started, what happened.
Sure. So I think family's been in Ayurveda for a very long time. My grandfather and great-grandfather were doctors. I think each of us, whatever we do, we have a very personal story that leads to the decision, the passion, and eventually the process and the journey, right? So for me, that started when I was really young. I suffered from asthma. I grew up with juvenile bronchitis. So I couldn't have Coke, Limca, Fanta, Sprite growing up with jack my throat. I couldn't have ice cream till I was like 13, 14 years old. And I love cricket. I couldn't play cricket because there's too much dust on the cricket field. So while everyone was playing cricket and football, I was playing golf and squash as a kid, right? Because those sports didn't have you interacting with as much dust. So really, asthma prevented me from having what I would call a normal childhood. And I didn't like that, honestly. So I thought to myself, there is something I need to do to get past this. And my grandfather got me on Ayurvedic treatment. 14 years of Ayurvedic treatment later, I was cured of asthma completely, and I could start playing cricket again. And I was always someone who, like, hard work is part of my life and the way I am. And so I decided that this cricket team that I'm going to be a part of, I'll show up to every practice, because that's my mentality, that's my way of doing things. And I was made captain of the school cricket team. So it was not a great team, honestly. We didn't play so many matches also. But I was made captain of the school team because I showed up to every practice. And that was a big moment in my life. Actually, if you look at it, wasn't a really big thing, but for me it was a big thing, right? And so I think that made me start thinking that Ayurveda is more than just my family legacy. I went to the US to do my undergrad, and there I saw yoga being repackaged, right? Yoga mats, yoga gyms, yoga apparel, Lululemon, multi-billion-dollar industry in the US. And I started thinking to myself that it's amazing that yoga is global, but it's not so amazing that Indian companies have not taken yoga to the world. And I'm very patriotic. So I called my dada from campus and I told him this. And I promised him I'll do something with the legacy. And then I moved back to India. I was working in finance and he passed. And so after he passed, I remember the promise I made him and I said, Chal, I'll quit my job and I'll go ahead and I'll do this. By the way, I had the first one. I found it spicy. So I'm going to struggle.
You said that a lot of Indian companies don't do yoga, Ayurveda. They haven't taken it global. Like, people have come, picked up our culture, made multi-million-dollar businesses out of it. Did you ever feel like you needed to make a point and say that, hey, this is my culture and I am going to make it big, versus some random guy that came, picked up my culture and like sort of...
Yeah. So I remember a very sort of random anecdote, right? Okay. When I started college, my Dutch friend from down the hall was teaching me yoga. And that's when I started thinking to myself, it's amazing that it's Indian, but it's not so amazing, honestly, that we haven't taken this to the world.
But it's also kind of ironic, I feel like yoga's been there for centuries. And then when US decides to embrace it, not just yoga, right? Yoga, Ayurveda, anything that's kind of rooted from India. The second folks in the US start practicing it more religiously, taking it seriously, I saw the trend pick up again in India. It's just a very strange pattern.
It's strange, but I would say, I leave aside the strange part. What are we missing out? We didn't make it sexy. We didn't make it cool. We didn't make it aspirational. So when I started Dr. Vedis, that was the objective is, hey, look, Shatavari and Safed Musli and Ashwagandha, like my grandmom knows which ingredient goes into which product. But after the generation just didn't know that. And so it had to be repackaged or rebranded them in a format that appealed to modern consumers. And so while it's odd and weird, if you take the insight from that, this is the insight.
And I remember that the first product you started was also
a hangover product.
Yeah, it was a hangover product. I'm like, the perfect way to...
Okay, it was also because I was 24 and a half years old, and so I didn't want to sell diabetes and arthritis as much that my dada did in his clinic. But I really enjoyed selling that product. It didn't scale so much. But had I launched it 2 years back and I had access to Zepto and Blinkit and Instamart, the game would have
those would have been...
Yeah, it would have
because we were selling it online mostly, right?
What year was this?
We started 2016, but 17, 18, 19 was a scale up of the business. You can't wait 3-4 days for a hangover product to reach you.
Yeah, it's like, I want it right now, I'm going for a party, get it, move on, sort of a thing.
And also like, when I was just reading up, I saw that the revenue kind of 8x from say 2019 to 2020, right?
And then even 21.
Yeah, and 21.
So COVID was also a sort of fillip for the business.
I see.
Oh, okay. It grew during COVID.
Exponentially.
Yeah, because
Ayurveda, everyone was looking at immunity, natural products, all of those things.
As a segue for that, right, Arjun? Why was Ayurveda not embraced? Why was Ayurveda not considered more seriously before COVID and say during COVID or post COVID? Like, what change happened that actually led people to like?
It was a black swan event. I think if you think about immunity in India, right? Until COVID, we had this immunity product. Nobody bought it. Nobody cared. Right? I think that time period made people realize the importance of health much more than they've ever realized. Like I was at a conference recently and more people asked me about my workouts than my work. So it's clear that the narrative is changing and people are understanding health. And sometimes I think you need that push. You need that moment to really push you over the line. And this was that moment for us.
And when you started off this journey, right, I remember reading or hearing that your first internship was with your dad, right? And like the decision framework was always that you wanted to push or solve for something more serious like asthma or something like this, and that's why you chose.
My first internship was at age 15 after I finished my ICSE in my dad's store.
Yeah.
So my dad runs a jewelry and watch business, and he had a fashion watch store in Phoenix Mall in Bombay. We had gone for a holiday to the US and Canada that year. At that time, incoming calls in the US was 110 rupees a minute and outgoing calls was 150 rupees a minute. I had a girlfriend at the time.
Don't tell me you made calls from there.
She called a lot.
Okay.
And I spoke a lot. And so my bill came to 35,000 rupees. And I was 15 years old.
At that, what year was it in?
15 years old, so 2007.
Oh man, 35,000 in 2007.
35,000 rupees.
Yeah.
And like, what do you say, right? So my parents were not, like, I expected to be in deep trouble. My parents honestly saw it happen during the trip. They saw me make those calls or answer those calls. They knew what was going to happen, right? It's clear. So my dad said, look, obviously you've messed up, but what can I do by telling you something right now, right? So I think the decision he made at that time was quite an interesting one. He said, go and earn the money back. Go and work in my store and earn the money back. And so I worked in the store and I learned a lot. Like, it was obviously my dad's store, right? So I had to like make myself not the boss's son after a while. And so I learned merchandising. I had a lot of friends who used to come to that mall, right? Because we were free after ICSC. Would make fun of me. I felt that whole thing. Why am I the only one doing this? I think through that process, I learned the importance of hard work. I learned to value money much more. And I learned really like the grind of standing for 12 hours and selling.
Man, yeah,
I love that.
That grind is
I love
something
it.
else.
I
Yeah.
love it.
And irrespective of whether it was your dad's business or the generational business that was started, did you feel like there was a lot of pressure for you to succeed from the get-go, or did you take that upon yourself, or was there like an afterthought that made you think that there is no scope for failure and you need to take really
No,
calculated
I
risks?
think because I've come from a entrepreneurial family,
They embrace
failing
the
is
whole-
okay. Failing is fine. It's part and parcel of the journey, right? And so, look, we all say as entrepreneurs,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
we hear
say.
on these podcasts, where failure is a badge of
Yeah.
honor on your sleeve and all of that stuff. But I think that it's easier said than done, by the way. I still get disappointed when I fail all the time. But the family support through that failure was important, right? And so I think it was okay. There was no pressure. The pressure was the pressure I built up on myself. But externally, there was no pressure as such, which was really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, that helps. I think, but it's very easy to say failing is nice. I started I think I spoke to you as well. When I was doing my first startup, I spoke to Arjun. I said, hey, can you please like help me, like be my mentor, be my guide, sort of a thing, and like help me figure it out. But it miserably tanked. Like it tanked so bad, and it wasn't easy to be like, okay, now I'll go get a job. Now I'll do something that's not of my own, leave that behind. It's very easy to glamorize.
It's easier said than done.
It's very easy to glamorize it, but it's very, very hard.
Yeah, now it's like look, when I started, there was not all this like entrepreneurs were not heroes. There was not so much content about it. We weren't getting invited
Yeah, now
to
it feels like you're falling off a pedestal.
invited to podcasts and stuff like this, right? But now that you all see this, there's a whole different perception to how sexy, glamorous, exciting entrepreneurship is. Oh, I can be on Shark Tank, I can be on TV, I can do all of these things. And look, it's amazing, right? It's really amazing because entrepreneurs are really heroes. They go through really tough journeys. They really fight through tough times. And so I think in all of that, just seeing reality is also important.
Yeah.
2 minutes later.
My tongue is already burning. My tolerance is very low. Basically, I used to eat a lot of spicy food. And I went to the US to do my undergrad. And then there was no spicy food.
That is
and then I
such
came back to India and I just had no tolerance at all for spice. At all. I'll say one thing. All my friends said it as well. All my friends who are not Indian. My Bombay accent never changed while I was in the US. I never said 30 or 40 or shower. None of that. I spoke the same way all through that time. And that was really important for
Yeah,
me.
you achieved something very important.
Spice tolerance I lost, but my accent stayed.
You should be very proud of yourself.
Yeah, very proud.
No, I was just coming back to the whole entrepreneurial journey, right? What were in retro, when you look back, what were some traits that you feel people now who start off their businesses should definitely consider inculcating? The reason I'm asking is this is the year of sustainable growth, revenue. It's not the, hey, let's just raise funding, just acquire users at any cost possible and then figure out the way to profitability. But the mindset, however, hasn't changed for founders. They still are in the how can we grow fast but also sustainably, and I feel like it's a conundrum. I don't think both go hand in hand necessarily.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tightrope. It's a balancing act. How much growth is enough growth, but how much burn is too much burn, right? Basically, I think some things that can help, right? Entrepreneurs have big burdens on them, and so taking off the burden by having strong people in your team is really, really important. Having people smarter than you in their specific functions. I didn't realize this till 2.5 years in. Second thing I would say is do a crash course in finance. There's enough content available online now. Like you have no excuse to not understand your finances, especially if you have taken someone else's money. It's your own money and you blow it up, fine. Like you have yourself and your family to answer to, but it's someone else's money and you don't know what's happening with it. It's a disaster, complete disaster. So I think these two things, and then I would say third thing that is really important in this sort of sustainable growth mindset would be like reviewing your actions every month, like reviewing where we have got and then where we need to go. Because when you're in the business all the time, then you are like a horse with blinders, right? You're not stepping out and seeing the real perspective. Hey, I did this. Now, where does this go from here? Can this be grown? Should I stop this? Should I not follow this, etc. All of that. So those monthly reviews, if you don't have investors on your cap table, I used to go to my dad. He was in the jewelry business, right? So I would show him my P&L and ask all of these questions to him. I think they're really important because working in the business is what we do all the time. And working on the business, a little bit at least, is important.
So building a strong team, having monthly retros, and definitely
understanding finances. Yeah, 100%.
These three things.
I can't even ask my question. Your face is you're so scared to put it in your...
This is the how much is too much, Alu?
Yeah.
How much is less?
He was like, okay, should I take a small bite?
No, you were looking, so I took a big bite. I didn't want to take a big bite, but you were looking, so I took a big bite.
I wasn't looking at you to take a big bite. I was like, your face was epic. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like allow him his moment. Yeah, so I just want to understand, you worked in the D2C, like you've built Dr. Vaidya's in the D2C space. What are some current sectors that are good for D2C? Like where would you start a D2C business today if you had to?
What I would start now, the answer is actually very different from what I would start 5-6 years ago when I started, right? And so I think if I look at the landscape today, right? I think there are certain industries and sectors that have gotten exceedingly competitive, right? Okay. And so if I were to talk about personal care, for example, India has undergone a personal care revolution in the last 10 years.
Okay.
A customer in a tier 3 city knows what hyaluronic acid and salicylic acid is, right? So clearly, and so there are some really large businesses that have been built, both offline for a long time, but also online through digital and D2C brands.
Okay.
So I think in personal care, if you don't have a specific niche that is genuinely unique, it's a really hard business to build. So personal care would be really tough. Having said that, a category which is competitive, but still there is lots of headroom for growth. And you can actually, if I was bootstrapped, for example, you want to raise money, I'd go to fashion. So the last 10 years, India has learned to consume fashion online.
Isn't it saturated though?
I thought exactly what you're saying. And then I met 8 companies in the last 2 months that do 100 crores plus, bootstrap, profitable and less than 5 years old. So clearly, while we think it's saturated, there is so much demand. And why is there so much demand? Because, fashion is a large category in India.
Correct.
Right? And then over the last 10 years, I remember when I started my first job, Myntra and Jabong started sort of becoming relevant, etc. All of that, right? And then fashion became like returns. People are asking questions like, oh, can I buy a shoe but I'll have to return it, should I even buy it, etc. With time, customers have become sort of more accustomed to consuming fashion online, more accustomed to buying shoes online, more accustomed to buying fashion accessories online, more accustomed to figuring out, it looks like this on the website, how will it look like on me, etc.
Yeah, I think
I think customers become used to it now.
Correct.
And that's why you're even seeing RTO rates not at 50-60% like they used to be. They're at like 20%, 25% for decent brands.
With good
right?
accuracy and a lot of other things.
I think logistics has also come to the fore. I think the infrastructure around e-commerce has been built. This is exciting, fashion. And then the other spaces I would say is I'm still biased towards health and wellness. If you build unique products, not me too products, you build unique products, then I think health and wellness has some amount of... So for instance, Dr. Vaidya's formulations were proprietary, right? So even though there were other Ayurveda brands in the market, Dr. Vaidya's products were unique to Dr. Vaidya's, the formulations of products, the sort of conversation we were having. And so there are lots of spaces like this, whether it's general health, supplementation, sports nutrition, energy drinks, so many of these spaces where still there is sort of growth available. But in health and wellness, it takes time. To build trust, to get someone to ingest a product is very different from someone putting on a cream or putting on a t-shirt, right? So I think the challenge is that people expect growth very fast, but it doesn't happen. It's a sort of slower journey to inflection point. Once you get the inflection point, you will get that.
Tell us a little bit about, you've spoken about what sectors D2C should be in.
When you know if it's right.
When you know if it's right to be in D2C or do something else altogether.
Yeah, look, I think the first, there's two aspects to it. One is the P&L has to work, and two is the customer needs to want to buy it from there as well, right? So P&L working, what do I mean by this? I mean that let's say you take phenyl, right? Or you take some home cleaning solution or liquid, etc. all of that. Now, if you look at a D2C P&L, there is a sort of MRP of the product, there's the discount, and there's the selling price. Then there's gross margin, cost of goods sold and gross margin of the product. Below this, you have largely three costs. You have the customer acquisition or the marketing cost, then you have the logistics cost, and then you have the miscellaneous packaging, payment gateway charges, etc., which are very small usually. Right? Now, in a brand, usually the logistics cost is like, including COD, between 50 to 100 rupees. To deliver a product across India. If you go to even a tier 3, tier 4 city. Right? Now, in a product where the volume is high and the value is low, let's say you take a 1 liter of phenyl, it will cost you 100 rupees to ship and the product will be worth 100, 150, 200 rupees.
Correct.
So, if the logistics cost is high, and it's usually this in low value, high volume products, then you face a challenge. The second type of business is, we were talking before we went on air also, you may want to go D2C, but your customer may want to buy it from an offline store, right? Or you may want to sell on your website, but your customer may want to buy it from Amazon.
Correct.
So the great part about digital business, the feedback loop is not so long. And so if your product is just not selling, or your customer acquisition cost is too high as compared to your average order value, or it's selling on marketplace versus your website, or it's selling better offline versus your website, it's clear that this is not working. And so as an entrepreneur, you have to be open to reading the data and seeing the insight from the data. So for example, if you're running a website, you're running a marketplace, and your customer acquisition cost is 1/4 on the marketplace and the website, and you're selling 3x on the marketplace and the website, it's clear the customer wants to buy from there. So that's where you should spend your time versus here. And if you think about offline, you think of B2B, all of these channels, that's the way you think about it.
TLDR is sell where your customer wants to purchase your goods.
Sell where your customer wants to buy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very intuitive way to think about it as well. Like, where do I go buy phenyl? I'm not going to buy it online. I'm just...
That's intense. I'm reading the bottle, it's saying blazing out and I'm sweating.
Yeah. We can see it. You can ask for your lifeline, by the way.
Does it get better after this?
Depends.
Okay, I'm taking my lifeline. Hit me with the sweet spot. This was crazy. I've also invested in this.
Yeah.
What is it called? Go Zero, correct. Yeah.
Speaking about investment side, you have invested in a very diverse set of startups, ranging from say F&B to other categories as well.
Cuckoo FM, and
Yeah.
then there's like Go Zero. And it's a very diverse.
What is your
portfolio.
decision making framework? How do you kind of identify
I think he's
potential?
not listening to our
No,
question.
listening.
How do you identify potential startups ready to like have exponential growth, irrespective of the category? When you say per se don't have complete knowledge of that specific area.
There's two ways to do it. I can't even talk.
Take your time.
I can form small sentences, not long, nuanced sentences anymore.
This is where your capability to be articulate
It goes away.
goes away.
So I think there's two ways to do it. The first way is you create a thesis and you go out and look for businesses in that space, right? So, say I think something can be built in coffee at a mass price point. Then I'll go out, I'll talk about it, and I'll find business in that space. The other space is you meet, through being in this ecosystem, you meet amazing entrepreneurs all the time. And then you build a thesis if you don't have a thesis.
Right.
So I think those are the two ways. You'll see my answers getting much shorter now.
Yeah. At this point, he's also like, quickly, next, move on. Just trying to like double click on what you said. Unless you have access to large pools of data, unless you're speaking to the right people, like most people that probably think about, maybe they have a small pool of wealth, they want to angel invest, they have like, they can do stock market, etc., etc. They don't really have access to such a large pool of data, even though there is some information online. Well, there is some amount of.
I think in early stage investing, information is democratized in the sense that you can now use LinkedIn and reach out to founders and have those conversations, join an angel network, hear pitch calls, listen to pitch calls, all of those things. So I think it's not a sort of walled world now as it used to be 5-10 years ago.
It feels that way though.
But I think I'm new to this world. I started investing only for 18 months. You have to be open to learning from other folks, open to reaching out, open to having those conversations, and open to cold calling. As long as you're open to doing that, some people will reply, some people won't. From that, you just move on and move on and move on.
So networking and figuring that
For early
data
stage investing,
out,
it's crucial.
you have to give us a sense of, okay, if a Cuckoo FM came to you versus a Go Zero came to you, what would the two strategies for making a decision whether you want to invest in them or not be?
I think in Go Zero, we already had an idea that we wanted to do something in ice cream.
Okay.
And that ice cream was being sold very well through Swiggy or Zomato.
Okay.
In Cuckoo FM, other than the fact that I used to host a podcast on Cuckoo FM, I never thought I'd invest in the business. I used to have a podcast on Dr. Vedas called Daily Ayurvedic Tips. I used to host that on Cuckoo. So I think one was a thesis that had been built. The other was, with the entrepreneurs, we learned more about the business, more about the space, more about the size of the opportunity, and then went and made the investment. So both of them actually represent one thesis that had to be built after meeting amazing entrepreneurs who were probably what we felt the right people to build in that space. The other was, hey, we already are excited about this, and then we went out and looked and we found an entrepreneur doing some amazing work.
Got it.
Speaking about like the amazing entrepreneurs bit, right? Just want to double click on it. What are some traits that actually stand out to you when you meet them, and just make you put them into the amazing entrepreneur category?
And adding on to that, how much of your decision to invest
Is on that.
rests on the
50%
entrepreneur?
for me. 50% for me on the founder because I'm doing early stage investing.
Okay.
What are traits of early stage entrepreneurs who are amazing or good?
No, you can't do that. This is outright
dying.
cheating.
I'm dying
This
right
is
now.
outright. He's not even like eating it. He's at this point nibbling on it.
And I'm still struggling, by the way.
He hasn't even eaten it, dude. He's just like nibbled on it.
The bites are getting smaller with the alus.
The last one I took a really big one and I struggled with it. I think what? Firstly, I think I have a benchmark of what I was. And when I started pretty average. So has to be better than me at that time. First thing, right? I think both small picture and big picture is important. We need to know that this is going to get big at some point. We need to be able to run the day to day. Usually, if there are co-founders, I'm looking for a complementary skill set in people. I am also really index on people who are willing to listen. Because businesses will pivot, businesses will have iteration, business will move up, down, etc. All of that. But through that process, are you willing to listen to your investors? Are you willing to listen to your stakeholders? Are you willing to listen to the market? Someone's really set in their ways. Sometimes it actually, at that time, it's doing well. But then when COVID hit and the restaurant business shut and you didn't have an offline, you didn't have an online strategy to sell through Swiggy or Zomato, and you didn't want to do it, it would be over for you, and you shut it down.
Correct.
So I think these are the few things I would look at. And then I think other than this sort of more qualitative stuff, really the ability to have grit and resilience to fight through tough times. I think that's the hallmark of any good entrepreneur who has seen some failure, who's okay with failure, who has through the idea iteration process seen some failure, etc. I think that's an important one. And then I think a right to win is a great addition. Right? So I had a right to win in Ayurveda, for example. I had 150 years of family legacy and 105 formulations from day one.
What is the number one mistake someone can make while starting a business? Simple. It doesn't. I'm not saying
mistake you can make before you start a business and then after you start a business. I'll say both.
Sure.
Before you start a business, you do it part time. You have a good job and you say, okay, I'll do this nights and weekends and it'll become big. You can't be slightly pregnant with entrepreneurship. For me, either in or out, rip the band-aid. It's tough to rip the band-aid. It took me 6 months to rip that band-aid and let go of this sexy private equity job with an amazing salary. But only once I ripped the band-aid was I in the business. Other things move super slowly and someone will come and move faster than you. And then once you start a business, over-indexing on how smart you are and how many things you can do. I thought like, oh, I'm best at content, I'm best at content writing, I'm best at editing, I'm best at running the warehouse, I'm best at product development, I'm best at website, I'm best at Facebook, and I did everything myself. Because I was good at some of these things, I'm not going to lie. But I was a 5 on 10 because everything was coming on my plate. I would pick it up 1 week later. By the time I picked it up, it was not relevant. Didn't have time to respond to the email. I think that's the big challenge. Right?
Did you actually have was this like a proper blocker in your business because you were doing everything?
Yeah. Then my wife
It's like you become the single point of failure.
Yeah, then my wife came on as a co-founder. That helped. We had complementary skill sets. Okay. And then still, we were only 2. Then we realized the importance of hiring and getting people on board.
Talking about that, right, Arjun? Do you think it's better to always have a co-founder or a person with a complementary skill set when you're starting?
Complementary skill set for sure. Entrepreneurship is lonely. You can have a co-founder at least one. It's
good.
One person to deal with all that.
Yeah, doing
both
it.
The emotion and the work.
Yeah, also doing it alone gets a bit. You don't have anyone to bounce your ideas off of. Who are you going to?
Yeah, like
who's going to also? Sometimes someone needs to show the mirror. Be like, bro, this is bullshit.
So,
Don't do it.
Even with my wife, it was complete honesty when it came to the business. If I thought she was going wrong and it would offend her, I would tell her. And if there was an argument, what was best for the business won. If there was an impasse, then whose department it was won. It was very clear, these kind of things.
Yeah, that helps. That defining the master of one sort of framework, it really helps. Did this kind of ever have an impact on your relationship? Never? No? Is it hard?
I think
it can be hard. It can be really hard.
Look, I think it either works or doesn't work. And if it works really well. What it did have an impact was fights could last long. Because arguments of the office couldn't come home and
just
home fights couldn't percolate all through the office day.
Yeah.
So fights didn't last long, which was good. But no, I think it worked beautifully for us. Beautifully. I really miss it now. Because now we don't work together.
Yeah.
I miss it.
Yeah, that's very sweet. Yeah, but I've heard never work.
And in D2C, you have a lot of husband-wife co-founders or partners or co-founders, brothers and sisters doing businesses together.
It's also very
family business.
Yeah.
Time vibes in the new age
of
startups.
Try the next one.
Okay.
No cheating. This is the last one.
yeah.
Don't cheat.
This is the last.
You got this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cheat.
He's not cheating on this. Actually, this is relatively okay than all the other ones are.
Ready?
Yeah.
I'm not feeling that at all.
He's like, you guys don't talk. Y'all are lying to me.
It's like the tongue's
It's an
already.
after punch. Like a
Yeah.
real after punch.
Yeah.
Wow. It's the
So-
spiciest stuff I've had in my life.
Yeah, really?
Now you can compliment your brother-in-law on his sauces.
They're edible.
Yeah. Ending note. What is your next big bet in India?
It'll sound like a cliched answer, but the entire consumer space. I think India is a brand-starved nation. We have the largest, youngest middle class in the world right now. Aspiration is building. Amount of money that you can spend is increasing. Yeah, but I will say that it's complex. It's not easy. Everyone looks at these numbers and gets very excited. But I think brands huge opportunity.
But tell me, Arjun, it's very there is brand building for the top 1%, which
very
is
different.
most of it, and then there is brand building for there's buckets and toothbrush for like India, which is still the consumer space.
I want to invest in the rest.
In the buckets and the toothbrushes, not the 1%.
Not so glamorous, but the place
I like
where
that.
most of the money is made.
That's where I think there's scale available.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for being on the show. It was lovely having you.
You can see my face. I've struggled through this.
It wasn't lovely being here for him.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, folks. See you in the next episode. Bye.